As Mel Brooks would say, good evening, ladies and Jews. There's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is Mel Brooks will not be here tonight. The good news is if he were, you'd each be paying $400 a head. I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to give a big thank you to John and Lisa Shortino, our hosts. Thank you so much. Months ago, I got this email from a lawyer in Washington, D.C., and right away I got nervous. My first reaction was I'm being audited. I knew it. Then John went on to explain that he got my book and read my essay for the Library of Congress's National Film Registry and told me all about this event and asked if I would be the keynote speaker. So I really couldn't say no. And I am delighted to be your speaker, especially since finding a speaker has become increasingly difficult in this town. So yes, I am Scott Mednick. I am the author of the only biography of Gene Wilder called Gene Wilder, Funny and Sad, which is for sale, $20. It's a bargain, I'm telling you. And I'd be happy to sign it for you after the screening. Let me give you a little background on me. I'm from a theatrical family. My parents weren't in show business, they were just very theatrical. I'm a New York City native. I live on the Upper East Side, and I work in charming Times Square, which you may have heard is overrun with homeless people. And it's very sad because they come up to you and ask for money. And you don't know if by giving them money, you're helping to support their drug habit. So I just give them some of my drugs and cut out the middle. I first saw Young Frankenstein in the theater when I was very young. It was actually one of the first films I'd ever seen. And I couldn't have been more than 5, maybe 6 years old. And I loved it. I clearly could not understand all of the adult humor, but I just absolutely loved it. And as the years went on and I saw it on television and video, I started to understand the jokes and found it even funnier. As a child, Gene Wilder was my idol. I grew up in the mid-1980s, and most kids my age, their idols were Madonna, Michael Jackson, Boy George, Ralph Macchio. My idol was older than my parents. My 5th grade teacher once remarked that I looked like Gene Wilder, and I took it as a huge compliment. Sadly, now I look more like Dom DeLuise. The idea to write the book started actually as a research paper when I was a student at NYU. Our professor had given us an open-ended assignment to write 22 pages on any subject. So I thought, okay, this will be a breeze. So I rattled off 22 pages on Gene Wilder. And the professor was very impressed, and he was a biographer himself. And he encouraged me to turn it into a full-length book. And I thought about it, but I thought it would be too much work. And this was before the internet, so I didn't do it. And then I thought about it about a year or two later. I thought, well, no one's ever written a book about it, so mine would be the first. So I started writing some chapters, and my original intent was for it to be authorized and have him cooperate. Now, Gene Wilder was a very private person, neurotically private. So I sent him a few chapters with a letter. He sent me a very polite letter saying he couldn't cooperate, but he was glad I wasn't going to have to do a hatchet job. So I didn't think I'd be able to get anyone to give me interviews, so I abandoned the project for a year. And then I looked at it and said, this is pretty good. And I actually was able to get a lot of interviews with colleagues and even some relatives. The challenge was not writing the book, it was trying to get it published. I got rejections from literally hundreds of publishers and agents, but I got the nicest rejection letters. I got one letter from a publisher who said, I love Gene Wilder, I love your manuscript. If someone else published it, I would buy it, but we can't publish it. So the thing was that Gene Wilder was in his 60s and he really wasn't acting anymore, and that it wouldn't sell. So he had a memoir come out later on, and then I thought, well, that's it, I'm never having this published. But his book was very different, and I think he actually could have consulted me because he left out a lot of that stuff. So I sent the book to this publisher called Bear Manor Media, and they specialize in books about film and television and old movie stars. And about 4 months after I sent it, I got an email saying, we'd love to publish it. Being ever the skeptic, I wrote back and said, how much do you want? What's the catch? And it turned out, no, he really just wanted to publish the book. So I was thrilled, of course, and the book came out in December 2010 and did pretty well. Got a lot of good press and positive reviews, and for me, I was glad that my parents got to see it. As for the birth of Young Frankenstein, Gene Wilder came up with the idea. One winter, he was in the Hamptons renting a house, and he took a yellow legal pad and a felt-tip pen, and he wrote on top, Young Frankenstein. And he began to answer questions about what he would do if he were to inherit Frankenstein's estate in the present day. He told Mel Brooks about it. Mel was less than impressed. He said, cute, that's cute. Then Gene's agent, Mike Mednick, called and said, Gene, how about a film with you and Marty Feldman and Peter Boyle? And Gene said, how did you come up with that idea? He said, because I now represent you and Marty and Peter. And Gene said, with an artistic basis like that, he said, actually, I do have something. So he sent Mike Mednick a scene. He called him and said, I love it. How about we get Mel to direct? And Gene said, well, you're whistling Dixie because Mel is not going to direct something he didn't conceive of. The next day, Gene gets a call from Mel. What are you getting me into? So Gene and Mel wrote the first few drafts of the script, and they brought the film to Columbia Pictures, who thought the budget was too high, and they did not want to film in black and white. So they brought it to 20th Century Fox, who not only agreed to do the film and do it in black and white, they were smart enough to sign both Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks to exclusive acting, writing, and producing and directing contracts. And during this period, they both made some very significant films. Mel Brooks made Silent Movie, High Anxiety, and later History of the World Part 1. Gene wrote and directed The World's Greatest Lover, The Adventure of Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother, and he starred in Silver Streak, which is probably my favorite Gene Wilder film. Young Frankenstein cost $3 million and grossed $40 million in its initial run, which was a lot of money in 1974. Gene and Mel were nominated for the Oscar for Adapted Screenplay, but lost to Francis Ford Coppola and Mario Puzo for The Godfather Part 2. I'm still convinced the mob was involved. I'm often asked why the film is a classic. And I think first you have to look at the cast. Gene called the cast the best comedy ensemble ever put on film, and I agree with him. I wrote an essay about Tootsie, and I said Tootsie had the best ensemble since Young Frankenstein and before Moonstruck. And if you look at the cast, I mean, Marty Feldman, no one else could have played Igor. You have Terry Garr in her first major film role, who was just so sexy and funny as the Swedish lab assistant. Madeline Kahn, who was basically a Jewish American princess in Transylvania. But boy, what a job she did. And Peter Boyle took what could have been a thankless role, and forgive the pun, put life into it. And of course, you had Cloris Leachman as Frau Blucher. And then there was Gene Hackman in that cameo that I think shocked everyone the first time they saw it. I think probably half the audience thought, is that Gene Hackman? And the other half, when they saw the end credits, were shocked it was Gene Hackman as the blind hermit. Another aspect is something that John alluded to, it's the look of the film. They were able to actually get the real sets from James Whale's original Frankenstein films. And because of the black and white photography, it looks like the films it's parodying. So visually, it's definitely Mel Brooks' best film. Also, the way that Gene and Mel worked was to have everything look authentic and proper. So the comedy basically came organically. In the classic scene where Gene Wilder lifts Terry Garr from the carriage and says, "What knockers?" Gene had said, if he'd made a funny face or played it for laughs, it wouldn't have worked. The craziness is funny because everything around these characters looks normal or abnormal. And going back to the cast, they all had a great time making this film. If you see the DVD outtakes, it's amazing the film was ever completed because they couldn't stop laughing. And it wasn't just them, the crew was laughing. And the camera was shaking. I mean, they were just having too much fun. And you could sometimes see that in a finished film. Gene Siskel used to quote George C. Scott, who called it joy of performing. And that's certainly the case with this film. There are even some scenes, if you've seen it a ridiculous amount of times like I have, where you can see it looks like Gene's about to break up and then they cut away. And Gene was actually going through a very rough period, personally during the making of the film. He was going through his second divorce. His wife thought he was having an affair with Madeline Kahn. Gene and Madeline were always good friends and were never romantically involved. But he got along very well with Terry Garr. And after filming, the two became a couple. And I'll read a quote from Mel Brooks. Give me a second. You know, this is very good. I really suggest you buy this. Mel Brooks said she was fresh and funny and sexy, and Gene was absolutely crazy about her. And they liked each other a lot, that's all I'll say. Do we have any, I know we do, because two of you have actually admitted it, do we have any young Frankenstein virgins here? Uh-huh. Well, we'll be gentle. I'm going to wrap up here, and I just want to say, with all the terrible things going on in the world, I think it's important that we do something like this and we gather and we laugh. Mel Brooks has said many times over the years, he attributes some of his success to Adolf Hitler. And meaning that he wanted to get revenge, and the way he got revenge was making fun of him. And there's obviously a lot to be said about comedy, especially during difficult times. And I'd like to just read one quote from the book of Gene's, where he spoke about the effect his comedy would have on people. And he said, "I think the greatest thrill I have of all the things that can happen to an actor is when you meet someone who's been up the road and back, and you see the pain in their eyes. And they grab your hand and they say, I just want to say thank you. Because I was in a lot of trouble, you know what I mean? I was in a lot of trouble. Everything's gone wrong. But I laughed. For 2 hours I laughed. God bless you for that." I think that says it all. Again, thank you all for coming. Thanks again to our wonderful hosts, John and Lisa. And if anyone has any questions, I feel like I'm the White House press secretary.
Sure. So you said because Gene Wilder, I guess, didn't cooperate with you. So who did you talk to about this movie that you found the most interesting? And you got all those great details from.
It was a lot of research. A lot of the book, actually the whole book was written pre-internet. So everything I had was based on newspaper clippings and interviews I would take from television. And it was just a lot. It was also a lot of analyzing the film. So it was very difficult in the sense that you couldn't Google anything. So it was a lot of research. It was interviews with people. It was a combination of a lot of those things. Yes.
What was the it's pre-email, obviously. What was the screenwriting process like for Brooks and Wilder when they were doing the first couple of drafts?
Well, Gene wrote the first draft, and then they worked on the subsequent drafts. And according to Mel, they would meet at Gene's apartment in New York City. And the first hour was, what kind of coffee are we going to have? What are we going to eat with the coffee? Are we going to have cake? Are we going to have cookies? Then after that, they started writing, and that was kind of their collaborative process. And the only argument they had was the putting on the Ritz number. And Gene was insistent that they have it. And Mel said, but this isn't them dancing to Irving Berlin. No, it's ridiculous. And Gene got to the point where he said, I was turning red. And finally, Mel Brooks gave in. And Gene says, you made me go through all that. Why? And he said, because you're quiet and you're timid, and if you're fighting this hard, it must be good. And the irony is the putting on the Ritz number is maybe the most famous scene from the film. Yes?
How many times have you seen this?
I could have gotten a degree in something the amount of times I've seen this. It has to be over 50 times. And it's not even the most watched film I've ever seen. I'm very lonely, I'm sorry. Yes?
What was the critical reception like when it came out?
Critics loved it. It got really, really great reviews. Made a lot of money. Oh wait, are you talking about my book or the film? No, the movie was a hit from the beginning. There were actually round-the-clock showings of it. It was a big hit. Yeah. Yes.
What caused the thing where somebody's name was said, and every time the name was said, a horse whinnied?
That was Frau Bucher.
Hey!
Yeah. There was a rumor, perhaps Mel Brooks started it, that Blucher was the German word for blue, which is why the horses would. That's not true. It was not. I think the whole thing was that she was so terrifying that even the horses were scared of her. But no, it was not the German word for blue. Yes.
Hey Brian, could you make this movie today?
You could possibly make this movie. You could not make Blazing Saddles. I just think there's such a lack of creativity. I don't know who would make this movie today. So I don't know. Probably not. Probably not. Yes.
So as we're getting into this, someone who's seen this a couple times, can you give us, I've seen it a bunch of times, but not to the level that you've seen it. Can you give us a couple of things that we should look for that you've seen that you think just little Easter eggs and things like that that we might want to try to look for?
That's a good question. Brooks is not in the film. And that was a decision that was conscious because I guess he wouldn't have fit into Transylvania. But there's a scene where you hear a cat. Mel Brooks' voice is the cat. And I think his voice is somewhere else and I can't think of it right now. But the scene when you hear a cat, that's Mel Brooks. Yes.
What did Wilder think of this as in terms of his legacy? You know, a man who also, among other things, did Willy Wonka. Where did this rate in terms of where he felt he had gifted the world?
It was his favorite film and his favorite performance. And he'd said in an interview, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years before he died, he said, I don't want my grave to say, here lies Willy Wonka. He said, Dr. Frankenstein, I wouldn't mind. And the irony, of course, is he had no control over that because when he died, every obituary, every news clip, all they were showing was Willy Wonka. And I think Willy Wonka and Young Frankenstein are his two best performances, so I don't think it's such a bad thing. But having seen the film 2 days ago in preparation for this, and I hadn't seen it in a while, it's just a masterpiece of acting. It really is, and not just comedic acting. There's a lot of drama to the performance. So for the virgins, you'll see that. Okay, John, I think we should get going. So, thank you, everybody.